Well, friends, welcome back to another one of these hard conversations that we're having in this particular cultural moment. Obviously, the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, really a host of others over the years has led us to a point where there's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of protesting, a lot of demonstrating. And one of the temptations in a time like this is to dehumanize entire groups of people that we don't have relationships with. And so part of the challenge that we have that I've presented to our congregation, and if you're listening to this, I'll present that challenge to you as well, is to really build relationships with people who are different than us, who come from different walks of life, who experience life differently than us. And we're having, again, a series of these, and so this is just the latest. My name is Doug Ressler. I am the senior pastor of Parker Evangelical Presbyterian Church, and I am here with Joe Bradley. And Joe is a law enforcement officer, and so Joe, would love to hear just a little bit of your perspective during this time together. And so why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. My name's Joe Bradley. I grew up here in Colorado and born and raised. And as a youngster, I had a love for the outdoors. And as I still do, and as I grow up, that love kind of pushed me off to the direction I thought my career was to go. And beginning in 1989, I was working in public safety, but more in the land management perspective, working with everything from the state parks to the Forest Service to Bureau of Land Management. And through a series of strange events over the course of about 7 or 8 years after college, God moved me from outdoors, where I thought I was going to be doing my career as a ranger to more of a municipally oriented policing. And just the other night here, I had realized, wow, it's been 25 years since I first pinned on my badge as a full-time police officer. And so I've been a cop for the last 25 years, been in public safety really since 1989. And this is a very delicate time right now.
It sure is. And as a law enforcement officer, you are an agent of the state. You represent more than just yourself. But like you and I were talking about, with as much power invested in someone like yourself, there's a limit to what you can do. You cannot, by force, drive hate out of someone's heart.
No.
You cannot, by enforcing the law, require people to love one another.
No.
Only Christ can do that. And so that's part of what I want to dig into today. And so Psalm 89:14 is sort of the text that we are using to guide these conversations. And in Psalm 89:14 it says this: "Righteousness and justice are the foundations of your throne, O Lord. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you." God's throne, God's kingdom is founded on these twin pillars, righteousness and justice. So righteousness being our personal righteousness, the choices we make, our morality, those kinds of things, our godly character. Justice being the systems that we live under. Justice system, the criminal justice system, the educational system, the political system. These are should be justice-informed systems. It's very challenging when a righteous person lives under a very unjust system. And it's very challenging or, even discouraging when you see a very just system and very unrighteous people living under it. I mean, Jesus himself said, hey, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. And we don't often understand why do unrighteous people seem to get ahead in this world and those kinds of things. And that's something that Jesus even himself talks about. But today we're here to talk about what Christians are called to lift both of these things up. So you are an agent of justice in our world, right? Enforcing the
Correct.
systems of justice that we have in place. And I know you're a righteous man. So talk to us a little bit about the challenge of that. I mean, how do you seek to live that out, your faith? How does it inform your work on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. But you were talking earlier, Doug, just about how, we have these, I guess I'll say, we use your words, power that's been entrusted to us or bestowed on us as police officers. And really, it's not, I don't see it as so much as my power as I see as two different things. It's my authority that the public has given me as a police officer, but more importantly, it's the responsibility that they've given us. And they're two very different things. I have very little power, I have very little authority, but I have this almost unimaginable, pressing burden of responsibility to use that appropriately and within the context of what the public has entrusted me to do.
Amen. You're absolutely right, and I imagine you carry that burden pretty heavily, and I imagine most police officers do.
They do, and I think it can be misunderstood by some, not only in the public but also by police officers as well. I've heard it throughout my career. You guys, you just want to go out there and take people to jail. You just want to write tickets, and well, that's not necessarily the case. I have a burden to address the problems in the community that our city council wants to have addressed, whether it's traffic issues or crime issues or a combination of those two. And we don't come out of roll call and hit the road with, all right, yep, time to go, let's go out and have some fun. That's not necessarily the case. We certainly want to go out and have fun, just like everyone else would want to do. Everyone wants to have fun in their job, but we are being directed by another governing authority on what they want us to address within that community.
Yeah, I think about those words that are on every police car that I've ever seen: to serve and to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the call, not to beat down or destroy, right? And now within the course of the challenges of the job and the evil that you have to face and the difficulties and all of those things, use of force can be necessary, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But all under that mission statement, right? To serve and to protect. That's really, it seems to me, the mission of law enforcement. I'm sure you live that out day after day after day, and that's what makes you the man that you are. But it's got to be, again, stressful, difficult. Can you give us just a quick window into what is it like when you're out on the job and that call comes in?
If you want to take a snapshot in any given day of a police officer, you really have to look at what has gone on prior to that particular moment in time. From the time an officer goes through the academy, it's drilled into your head: safety, 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 safety. And it has to be, because people don't call 911 because they're having a great day. Right. People call 911 because at that moment in time for them, their world has spun so far out of their control, they need some help. So from the academy, you're taught safety and officer safety and how to do your job the right way. And you're taught throughout your upbringing and your training to balance that. Your own safety, you want to be tactical in how you operate your job, but you need to be tactful in how you do that. And it's a balance. And I'll just go off the example you said about a traffic stop. It's true. We don't know what we're all walking up onto a traffic stop. It could be Mrs. McGurty, who just is coming from her bridge club meeting, and you know what? She just rolled through the stop sign. It could be something very different from that. And the thing that people, I think, sometimes need to remember is, regardless of the call we go on, there is always a weapon at that call. Every cop has at least one gun on them, or a knife, whatever the case might be. So we could be bringing a weapon into that scene. And there's been a lot of officers who have been injured or killed with their own weapons. And just the very notion of having to always protect those weapons that you have and protect yourself, it is or it should be, an underlying concern in every officer's mind on every call they go on. If you can tell a cop when you walk in the room, he's the guy or the gal who's standing with their back against the wall, or they're in the seat that's facing everyone out and they're watching everyone who's coming in. It's just something that you learn. It's a self-protective behavior that you learn, and it's a survival mechanism.
Yeah, and being on that kind of high alert, all the time. Again, I've talked to several police officers in the course of my career, counseled several police officers, and it drains.
It is a physiological drain. It sucks the emotion, the energy from you. And when you are living in this, they call it hyper-vigilance, when you are living your day-to-day job in a hyper-vigilant state to where you are always on the lookout for something, whether it's someone wanting to hurt me or someone who is wanting to hurt someone else in the public, your body is you're in a constant adrenaline state. And it is draining when they've seen medical studies have shown how police officers, that hypervigilant state, your adrenal glands are firing and you are up here. And then if this is the where you should be, we drop down off duty below that mark, and we do everything we can just to try and get back up to a normal state of operating. And that's where the challenge comes in. If officers don't have healthy ways of relieving that stress, working out good relationships, faith, they tend to do harmful ways of countering the effects of it.
When I worked in the prison system, we saw that with corrections officers. They would turn to alcohol or drugs or other things, and it's just heartbreaking.
It is.
So talk to us about how your faith, again, righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. So righteousness is about our personal standing, right standing before the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, that's Jesus. Jesus is the one that gives us right standing. However, there is the call then for the Christ follower to pursue righteousness in their own life. And in that way, maintain that communion with the Lord in a really amazing and intimate way that allows us then to do whatever it is that we do, handle the stresses of our particular jobs or whatever burdens that we carry in this life. So talk to us about, how does your faith specifically really inform how you manage that up and that down, Joe, on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have found, and I don't think it has to do with policing, I think it probably applies to anyone in any career. If I, as I'm trying to roll into bed at the end of the day, and I look back and think, gosh, I just had a crappy day, and things just went south for whatever reason. More often than not, it seems I can rewind the tape and go back, you know what? I either shortchanged myself and didn't have my Devo time with God. I've made it a habit to get up early, whether I'm working a graveyard shift or a normal humanly shift in the daytime, to spend time with God the first thing. And for me, that helps put things in the proper context, not only to begin my day, but as I go throughout my day, and rely on Him, because there's a lot of things that happen that there's no explanation for, and I'm talking about in my work. I have no explanation. How do you explain having to deal with a dead kid? You can't. I don't know that you can find the answers unless there's a faith to turn to. For me, and my faith has been something that has been I don't know how I could have managed through a 25-year career without Christ. I don't know how men and women can manage through a 25-year policing career without Christ. Some do. I don't. I've never got to know them personally to see what I guess tools they use to manage it. But I just don't know. I have a hard time seeing how anyone can get through the day in and day out emotional trauma of policing without having a faith to fall into.
Amen. Yeah, that's really challenging. And I think that's true I've talked to police officers, firefighters, first responders, doctors, nurses, you name it. And with all of the trauma that you see day in and day out, it seems like people go one of two directions, or one of maybe three directions. They let their hearts get really cold because I need the emotional distance, right? Or it just breaks them and they can't handle it. and they end up washing out or flaming out.
Yeah.
Or, by faith, they find the courage to wade in day after day after day, and almost allow themselves to be re-traumatized. And in that way, I think that's part of what it means to share in the sufferings of Christ. Christ allowed himself to be traumatized, killed for our sakes. Every day that you walk into, your job, Joe, and the men and women that you serve alongside, they are suffering willingly. And I think this is what people don't understand about law enforcement. You are willingly going to places that no human being should ever have to see. You're doing it willingly and courageously so that we don't have to, so that others don't have to. And I hope people, whoever's watching, I hope that comes through loud and clear. Like, we have asked men and women like yourself to do this so that we don't have to. Because if you're not around, then all of us are going to experience this day in and day out, because that's just the world. Evil must be restrained.
You're right, Doug. Just touching on that, how it, the trauma that you have to be subjected to. Christ called himself the man of many sorrows, and when you don't find those outlets and find ways to put it all in context, it has an effect on you. It has an effect on you regardless. I have a friend of mine who said, I think he put it best. He said, policing is hard on your soul. It really can be. But it's a calling for many people. I can't explain why I'm here. Sometimes I feel like that turtle on a fence post. I don't know how I got here, but here God put me. And He uses me, and he uses police officers every day in their jobs to not just help other people, but help society at large. And when we lose sight of that, when we lose sight of we have a story, it's very easy for police officers to just feel like, the public misunderstands us, they misjudge us, which is accurate. However, they also don't know us. And I frequently tell some of my officers, this, she's not just not an addict who's a hooker out there. She has a story. She didn't, at 5 years old, she didn't say, I want to be a hooker one day. They don't do that. Her story brought her to that place in life. And when we lose sight of that, when we dehumanize how we see those people, we're going down that wrong path.
So let's go there. Obviously, a lot of what we see happening today is sparked by an incident in Minneapolis where a cop put his knee on the neck of George Floyd, and for 8 minutes, and George Floyd died. So here you have an agent of the state exercising force in a way that ends up killing a man. And of course, it's a white cop, and it's a black man. So that adds another layer to the conversation. So talk to us about that. Look, there are, doesn't matter what kind of work you do, there are good people that do the work, and there are bad people that do the work. There are conscientious people who do the work, there are careless people who do the work. There are compassionate people who do the work, and then there are people who are in it for all sorts of other reasons. Police officers are no different.
Right.
So talk to us about, give us a window into that world. I think a lot of people wonder, they see something like that and they're like, where's the accountability? What does that even look like? How are police officers held accountable, in our day and age? And, who are you guys responsible to? All of us live under authority. So who are you guys responsible to? And how are those things managed? And, give people a window into that, so they don't walk away with the impression that, cops just get to do whatever they want. We know that's not true, but help us understand.
Right. But I think that's, I hear that frequently. Cops get to do whatever they want to do. I hear that frequently, and the reality is I think that's just because people may be misinformed, and they haven't taken the time to try and get informed. It's no different than an officer going out, just another addict. Well, you haven't taken the time to maybe get to know what's that addiction cycle about. How did that come about? But I guess, and I'm going to look at this more from a larger perspective on you're talking about accountability, how do we hold people accountable? I think really healthy police departments, healthy police agencies, sheriff's departments, state patrol, whatever you want to call it, if they just focus on 5 different things: people, policy, training, supervision, and discipline. If they focus on those 5 things, things are going to go right. If we're hiring the right people, if we're vetting our people, if we are putting in place the right sort of policies, developing it correctly, updating it, implementing it correctly, if we train our people correctly using the most technologically advanced training that we can, if we supervise our people correctly, and that also goes back to the right people. If you're not putting supervisors in place who are going to draw the line and hold people accountable, then you need to get rid of those supervisors. And finally, discipline. Do we have a legal and morally justified disciplinary system that addresses wrongdoing when it occurs? Doesn't mean we got to lop people's heads off, but are we holding them accountable?
Yeah, when someone crosses the line,
yes, that's not right. Stop it. Right. So when departments focus on those 5 things, things go right. But when we fudge on any of those, when we're allowing things to be swept under the rug, supervisor isn't addressing, when an officer is compromising in any way, once that compromise starts, we compromise on the little things and it snowballs. Things go south.
Yeah, and that's when you end up on the news.
Exactly.
Right? And that's when you end up in these
and someone ends up dead.
And someone ends up dead because of again, going back to the responsibility you carry, the power that's invested in you, those kinds of things. That's, I think, really helpful for people to hear. Joe, thanks for sharing that. And, it strikes me that I remember a time when we were in Mobile, Alabama, and there was a lot of challenges between our particular neighborhood, which was a brand new neighborhood in this part of the city that had been really developed right next to a trailer park that had been there for, 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. And all this conflict began to happen. We were calling the police in over and over and over and over again. And finally, we had a community meeting, and the sheriff came to that meeting, and of course, many people in my neighborhood, which was wealthier, more white, those kinds of things, were saying to the sheriff, you've got to keep these poor, some of them were white, some of them were black, whatever, these poor, essentially, people who had issues with meth and drugs and some of those things, you've got to keep them out of our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Keep them away. They're vandalizing, they're doing all of these things, all kinds of stuff is happening. And the police officer said, well, again, what do you want me to do? Like, I can come in and I can, get them if they're trespassing, but if they're on public streets, they have a right to be on public streets just like you do. What do you want me to do? Like, I can do that. But what I can't do is solve this tension between y'all. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Nothing I can do about that. What are you going to do about that? Mm-hmm. Which was a great challenge back to us.
Yes.
And so here's what I guess my question is, Joe, it seems like, a lot of folks, myself included at times, fall into this trap of thinking that it's just up to the police to take care of everything. Mm-hmm. But it seems like we have a role. I have a role. Individuals have a role in also serving, protecting, helping in our society, being proactive and diffusing tension and some of those things. And so maybe speak to that. Like, how do people like ourselves come alongside law enforcement just in our day-to-day to try and ward some of these things off before they get to a point where we have to get the police involved? Sure.
I think the challenge too comes up when it gets to that point is people are so frustrated and angry in whatever the circumstance is that they finally thrown up their hands and they asking the police or demanding the police to fix it. And more often than not, this is something that it hasn't evolved over a couple of weeks or months. This could have been evolving, like what you're talking about, over generations. And you have this underlying tension that I can't fix that. A doctor can't fix it, nor can a teacher fix how a child has been brought up. And if an adult, a parent is demanding that this teacher fix their kid, it ain't going to happen. Teacher's going to invest all she can or he can, but it's just not going to happen. But I think going back to your point of what people can do to help us, it really is what you can do to help us help you, is maybe just try and fix problems before they get out of hand. You and I were talking earlier about just having conversations with people, conversations with your neighbor, with your coworker, with whoever that person is maybe that's not like you, or that you have a problem with. I've been on, it seems more often than not, when you go on a neighborhood dispute and you're talking with a neighbor, well, what have you come up with when the two of you have talked? I won't talk with that guy. Oh, well, there's your problem. When did you talk to him last? A week ago, last Thursday in 1983. They just haven't talked, and they've allowed things to fester, and they allow things to fester in isolation, and they don't try and put themselves in other people's shoes. It's very hard for us to step out of our own circumstance and see things through the lens of somebody else. And when we start to do that, things tend to take on a different hue. I think if people, I'll just talk from a police perspective, if someone were to, when someone asks me, have you ever shot anybody? What's the worst thing you've ever seen? Those are things I don't want to talk about, I think that'd be like talking to similar questions asking a prostitute, You don't ask those kind of questions. Now, those are natural questions. However, although I wear a badge, and I've done that for 25 years, that doesn't define who I am. That's just my job. Ask me about, hey, tell me your story. What's your story? And I'm happy to talk about that. And I think that's not just cops, that's anyone in life. A doctor. Ask them about, tell me your story. How did you get to where you are now? And it's amazing how people will soften and open up. I will say, though, with cops, you're probably going to have to ask that question a number of times. There's a level of trust that, in general, we don't have because it's a self-protecting mode, and it's going to take time. Don't expect to get anywhere with a police officer that you don't know in a hurry because it's going to take time. And you just kind of have to keep picking at it.
That's a great piece of practical, wisdom and advice. And as we kind of close this conversation up, the second half of that verse 14, righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. It seems that the way we get to a more righteous and more just society is the path of love. Mm-hmm. And so in the midst of everything that's going on right now in our culture and our time, and I've had lots of conversations with people who say, well, I don't have any friendships or relationships with people of color. And so in this time, they're thinking, how do I reach out and how do I begin that? And one of the things I tell them is, don't just reach out once, because you're just doing that for yourself. Really, if you're honestly searching for a relationship, invest the time. And I would say the same with police officers. If you're wanting to at this particular cultural moment, build a relationship with a police officer or get to know a police officer, be willing to invest the time that it's going to take. Because like you said, there's going to be this natural self-protection. Why are you talking to me now?
Right.
What's really going on here? What's the motivation behind this? And so be willing to sort of just listen and love and not have an agenda and just invest in that relationship. I think that really is the only way forward. I think the argument can be made that, like in Denver, for instance, the violence has gone down as the police have really, courageously stepped out in love to really listen to the protesters and love them and walk with them and the protesters in the same way. Like that's the pathway to a more righteous and just society.
Right.
Without love, without approaching one another in love, then what are we left with? Well, we're left with who can control. And that's what leads to violence. That's what leads to looting, or it's a desire to control what's not been controllable in the past.
Right.
And so the path of love is the only way forward. And so as we as individuals in society and as we participate, whether it's protests, or maybe we don't participate in the protests because we don't agree, but we still need to love protesters. Because otherwise, what are we left with?
Right.
Or maybe we are in those protests and we're really suspicious of police officers. We still need to take that path of love. Otherwise, you're just begging for a confrontation. And then confrontations, as we know, don't go well.
Right.
It's a spark, and then all of a sudden you have this fire that's raging out of control, that real people are getting harmed, real businesses are getting destroyed, real impact on society, which again only then leads to more suspicion, more confrontation, more pain, more suffering down the road. There's a cycle of violence begetting violence and hate begetting hate. And again, so we circle back to what Christ says to us, which is that steadfast love and faithfulness have to go before us. That has to be what leads the way. And so whether we're interacting, again, whatever level we're interacting on and whoever we are interacting with, we want to let Christ lead the way. Let his steadfast love and faithfulness lead us to deeper engagement with others and really a willingness to hear their story. And thanks for sharing your story, Joe. Is there anything else? I'll give you the final word. Any other thoughts you want to offer as a part of this conversation we've had today for folks who might be listening?
I would say that your police officers, sheriff's deputies, state troopers, you name the flavor, we all wear a badge, and we take that oath not arbitrarily, but we take it seriously. And the heart of every police officer that I've ever met is truly one that they want to help, and whatever that help might look like. It might be, I want to help because I want to arrest as many bad guys as I can and keep them out of my community. Or I want to help because I want to work in the school and help with our kids. But the underlying theme that I've seen from police officers, it really is just a servant's heart to help however they can, however they contribute to make our communities a little less dark, because we do see an awful lot of the darkness that is there even during the light. And seeing that darkness day in and day out, it colors the way we see the world. And we need as well the opportunity to step back and try and see things for the way they truly are, not just the way that we perceive our day-to-day work lives.
Well, Joe, I'm really thankful for your servant's heart and for the way that you model Christ, not only just in what you do, but who you are, and appreciate our friendship over a number of years now. And I think you've given us a great opportunity to know how to pray for you as a police officer and pray for your colleagues, the men and women you serve alongside, and also maybe to pray even for our community and how we can, as you said, begin to see one another, actually see one another for the real people that we all are. All of us have a story, all of us have a background, all of us have life experience that's driving who we are, what we do, how we think, what we say. And if we can, as you said, be willing just to kind of get behind the curtain a little bit and really listen and love and learn, I think that's really the pathway forward. So thanks for having the conversation today, brother.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. God bless you.